After your seedlings sprout, you want to get them under light as quickly as possible. Now, the ideal situation is to get them directly outside under the sun. The sun is the best source of light because it's the sun. Everything else we make, including every single light ever, is trying to mimic the sun. So if it's warm enough out, get your plants outside. These plants will not tolerate temperatures below freezing. They will die. And the growth will stunt if it's chilly out. So, I mean, ideally they like it pretty warm, 70, 80 degrees. But even if it's 60 degrees out, getting them outside under the sun is a great thing to do, especially if you're a beginner and you don't want to put a bunch of money into grow lights. Especially with these plants, they grow so big that you only need the grow lights for a few weeks and then they're outside. So if you don't want to waste your money on lights that you don't need, get them outside. I start my seeds in the beginning of April, and in Maine, there's still a lot of snow on the ground, so I don't have a choice. I'm very competitive, and in order to be competitive, I have to start them early, and the only way to keep them growing is to use grow lights. But ultimately, the top things I would recommend is do not put them by a windowsill and think that that's enough. And 2, as soon as you can, get them outside. Now, I have 2 plants here. The one on the left actually came out of the soil a day before the one on the right, but you can see it's in a smaller pot, and you can also see that it's very leggy, like the stem is very long, and that's because I had that one by a windowsill, and I had the one on the right underneath a grow light, and you can just see how much better the plant on the right is growing. Again, a lot of that is because it's in a bigger pot, but putting it by a window just doesn't work. So get them under the sun if you can, and if not, try and find some grow lights. I'll put some links below of some affordable options that you can try, but just be aware of this when you plant your seeds. If you plant them too early, you're gonna have to find a way to give them the light they need. Now, one thing that's happening with my bigger plant is that it's getting a little too close to the light, and I might have to figure out a new system, or I just need to get it outside sooner. But if you notice, part of the leaf is singed a little bit, particularly along the borders. And if you look at this guy over here, he's having a hard time too. He's starting to burn a little bit because he's getting too close to the light. So even though I've been doing this for a long time, I still have a hard time keeping my plants looking good under the grow lights, and once they get outside, they do much better. Here's a closer look at the guy that's been by the windowsill. He can't even hold himself upright anymore. He's too leggy, and could he survive if you plant him outside? Maybe, but what I would do is I would bury all of this underneath the soil, because otherwise he'll snap in the wind the minute there's a tiny little breeze. So try not to put them by the windowsill. Try to get them outside or under a grow light. So I'm doing some test germinations, and I wanted to show you something interesting. This guy here, he just emerged out of the soil yesterday, so he's as young as a seedling can get. He's just a tiny little baby. So over the past 24 hours, we're going to see what his roots look like. So if you look here, that's a lot of roots for one day of a seedling being alive. And you can see if I were to stick it back in the pot, the roots are almost to the bottom of the pot. So that means probably tomorrow or maybe the day after, the roots are going to be on the bottom and it's going to begin the process of becoming root bound. So these roots grow really fast, and it almost makes you question, how long should we be keeping these guys in the pots? They should probably go outside sooner rather than later, because these roots want to spread out. All 5 of my seeds have sprouted, and they're doing pretty good. I have 2 seeds from Snoop Gourd, which is my 1482 Witty. I really like that seed because it has heavy genetics.
it has orange genetics, and it also has the 2365 Wolf in it, which is a seed that is currently selling for $1,000. So I love the genetics of that one, so I'm excited to grow my own seed. I also have 2 seeds from my 1363 Whitty, which is a self-pollination of the 2560 Ginger, which is a self-pollination of the 1885 Werner, which is world record genetics. So that also has great genetics. Now I have one other seed, and it's this guy right here. That's my 1832 Graham. I am the most excited to grow that one because it is a proven seed. It's grown multiple pumpkins over 2,000 pounds. Now if you look at it, you'll see that it's only got one cotyledon, and usually there's 2. The reason for that is just a freak thing, and the cotyledon just didn't develop really well, and it just kind of withered away and fell off. But you can see that there is the first true leaf coming up. So it's a little bit behind the others, but it's still my #1 pick for my main patch, and I'm not giving up on it. We just got to give it a little more time. Now, I think it's actually a good thing that it's a little behind because I'm still trying to figure out my lighting. I had everything all figured out this winter with my chest germinations, but what happened was 3 of the lights went out and I replaced them, and the new lights are way brighter, and I have to keep the light like way higher than I have. Now there are some plants that are still getting leggy pretty close to the light, but if you look, my fastest growing seedling so far, which is the 1363 Whitty, it's already starting to burn. So I've lifted the light up a little bit, and hopefully that'll prevent the rest from burning. So it's kind of a good thing that my best seed, or my seed that I'm looking most forward to planting, is a little behind while I figure out this lighting situation. So doing good so far, and I'm very happy with how things are going. One thing I like to do early on is to get the seedlings out in the sun right when they're just sprouting. This makes it so I don't really have to harden them off. Usually you have to harden them off if they've spent weeks and weeks inside and aren't used to the sun, they're not used to the wind, they're not used to the weather. So if we start when they're young, then it's not as much of an issue. The greenhouse is actually warmer than it is inside right now. It's about 85 in the greenhouse, so the plants love it. So I'll keep them out here as long as it's warm, and I'll bring them in when it gets cooler, and once it gets time to go into the ground, then we'll work on warming the greenhouse up at night. One other thing I do to help harden off my seedlings is I put a fan on them, and that helps mimic wind. If you don't do this, they do risk snapping in the wind, and it has happened to me in the past. You can see that these seedlings are getting a tiny bit leggy, and that's because I raised the light a little bit because the leaves were burning. The leaves are still burning a tiny bit, and it just is what it is. I don't want to put the light any higher because they're getting leggy, and that's a sign that they're reaching for the light. So when I do plant them in the ground, I will plant them up to the base of the plant. I'll cover that stem up, and they'll form some new roots along the stem. That's a bit leggy. So it's not a big issue. I just have to be very careful that they don't get snapped in the wind at this point. This is about the stage that I like to get my seedlings outside in the ground. I'll probably give them a few more days just because I have a few long days at work, and I think it's going to be cold the next few nights and during the day, so we'll give them a few more days. But once that second true leaf starts forming, which is that one, I like to start getting them outside. So in my next video, I'll show you what I do to transplant them and getting my soil ready and all the fun stuff. So this seedling here is the one that was growing the quickest and was a little too close to the light early on. You can see how it's affected that leaf versus the other seedlings after I raised the light. They are doing a lot better. They are crinkling a little bit, but not quite as bad as the other guy. So that's why I raised the light. Now, I've mentioned a few times how the light was burning the leaves of my plants. Now, Another thing that can burn your seedlings is if your soil is too hot, meaning it has too many nutrients in the soil. So that's why it's important, one, to use a seedling start mix or a seed starting mix. I use Black Gold seed starting mix. There are others out there, but it has a lower amount of nutrients than a typical potting soil would. And the other thing is, don't fertilize your seedlings. Just let them be. Feed them with water, and that's it. Don't go crazy feeding them the Miracle-Gro and all this crazy stuff. That's for when they get bigger, not when they're little babies, because you can burn them by feeding them too much fertilizer. If you do feed them anything, you want to go half strength, but again, I just wouldn't even feed them at all because there's enough in the seed starting mix that should get them through just fine. So a quick summary on seedling care. Get them under grow lights or in the sun as soon as possible to prevent them from getting leggy. Use a big pot because those roots will grow fast and will become root bound real quick. Don't expose them to below freezing temperatures because they will die. Harden them off by bringing them out in the elements a few hours a day. If they're in the greenhouse and there's no wind, maybe put a fan on them to help stimulate some wind. Lastly, do not fertilize your seedlings. It may cause them to burn. All you need is a little bit of seed starting mix when you plant them, and that has the perfect amount of nutrients. Do not go crazy with the Miracle-Gro right now. We will save that for later.